Before we get started, please remember this podcast is for general educational purposes only. We're not providing medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult your own healthcare provider about your care. Welcome to Fertility Nurses Unfiltered. 2 nurses, 1 mic, no bullshit.
I'm Ashley LaRue, fertility nurse and founder of Fertility.
And I'm Laura Wepler, fertility nurse and founder of Navigating Fertility with Laura.
You got questions, the internet has a lot of opinions, but what you really need is 2 fertility nurses who aren't afraid to tell the truth.
No scripts, no sugarcoating, just honest, evidence-based nurse-to-nurse conversation. So let's get into it.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Fertility Nurses Unfiltered. Ashley and I are so excited to be here with you today. And we are joined by Lana Manikowski, an awesome guest here today to talk about what it's like to go through the fertility journey. And I'm going to have her share her story, but I just want to give a little introduction on Lana before we get started. So Lana is a certified life coach, author, and the leading voice for women navigating life after fertility treatments end without children. She speaks to the reality that many women face, but few discuss when life does not turn out as planned and children are no longer part of the future that they imagined. After spending 7 years pursuing fertility treatments that did not result in a child, Lana reached the end of treatment to find no established support for women moving forward without children. When the resources she needed did not exist, she built them. She is the best-selling author of So Now What?, the founder of the Others Day, an internationally recognized annual event honoring women without children, and the host of the So Now What podcast, which reaches women around the world each week. Through her signature program, Thrive After Infertility, Lana helps women release the shame of not having a baby, strengthen their marriages, and feel like they belong in friendships and around family when they are the only one without children. She helps women build lives that feel purposeful, joyful, and whole beyond motherhood. Lana holds advanced coaching certifications in grief and post-traumatic growth and is a proud member of the American Society for Reproductive Medicine and an active volunteer with Resolve. Her work has made her a sought-after speaker for organizations, healthcare settings, and communities addressing infertility, womanhood, and life when fertility treatments ends without children. Her signature message is clear. Your story isn't over, it's just the beginning. So Lana, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited that you're here.
It's an honor to be able to speak with you today and talk about so much that people often forget or don't have the open place to speak of, leaving a journey through fertility treatments and remaining childless.
Yeah. I would love for you to kind of share about your journey, whatever you're comfortable sharing, and how, I think we just heard a little bit in that intro about, your journey, but I would love for you to tell it straight for us and, your passion behind what you do.
Yeah, well, for me, motherhood was something I thought would always happen, but it wasn't top of my list. When I graduated college, I was very interested in becoming successful in my career, living life, financially being independent, and just sort of doing these things that I didn't see a lot of women in earlier generations being able to do. And I just thought when I was ready and I found the person that I wanted to have a child with, it would happen. So for me, that was age 32 is when I met my husband, and we got married at 35. And it was just like, okay, I've always had regular cycles. Things will start to roll as they need to roll. So it was when I was 37, I was on the phone with one of my close girlfriends who, I don't really have a recognition of her telling me that she had both her children through IVF, but maybe it just wasn't ever part of a relevant conversation. But I remember we were on the phone and she asked me if Jack and I were planning on having kids. And at that time, it didn't really trigger me because even though I'd been trying for 2 years, there was no alarm bells going off in my brain. I don't know why, but they weren't. And it was that conversation where I told her that we'd been trying and hadn't gotten pregnant yet. She said, well, have you thought about getting a workup? And that was the first time at age 37 that there was this idea that I might need help getting pregnant. And in retrospective, views, I think, did no one talk about it in my OBGYN annual visits? Because I was always a regular patient. Was it something that I just like heard and it went through one ear and out the other? I don't know. But it was when I was 37 that I went and got that workup and I got diagnosed with unexplained infertility.
Mm.
So we can go deeper, as the episode rolls along, but just to give you an idea that I went through several rounds of IUIs and IVFs here in Chicago where I live, and then took about a year and a half gap and then restarted treatments and did it at a clinic outside of Chicago. And when I finished my rounds of IVF there, I had one frozen embryo from my first round in Colorado, and then at the end had it tested and had trisomy 16. So that was the end of the journey, and had a telehealth visit with my doctor who said, I know how badly you wanted this. He was very compassionate, but only offered a conversation around if I wanted to adopt or do a donor egg. But there was no conversation around what if that isn't the right decision for you. So our last conversation, he said, think about it and let us know. And we thought about it and decided that neither of those options were the right ones for us. So we just had no reason to call the clinic back. And that's where the communication ended.
Yeah. And you just never heard from them again. Is that right? I remember we had this conversation a while ago when we met, and I remember you telling me that, and I was like, wow, that's I can't even imagine how that would feel.
Yeah, it felt very isolating, but almost like, gosh, many people must not end up like this if there's no treatment conversation or any follow up that goes along with the end of that treatment journey. So from in my head, I was like, oh, well, I must be like one of few who ends up like this. Otherwise, there would be some more of an established care pathway. And I had spent 20 years in the medical field. My husband works in the medical field too. So I feel like I was very familiar with how to care for patients. I worked mostly with prostate cancer patients. So understanding like when they go through cancer treatments or they get a diagnosis, that there's always seems to be more of a connection point with those patients just to check in on them and do follow up. So I think for me, it was most surprising that there was nothing like that established. So I just assumed, many people must not end up like this. So no one really talks about this. But come to find out, it's a much different story now that I see it in the way that I do.
Yeah. Oh,
I-
go ahead.
No,
Ashley.
no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so you didn't hear from anyone. You and your husband made, the decision that those options that were presented to you weren't right. And so what kind of happened after that? Like, were you just kind of waiting to hear from the clinic and then nothing happened? Like, what did you do next?
I was sort of searching for someone to talk to that understood. And I think that was the hardest part. I remember I had worked with an acupuncturist who focused on women, helping women through their cycles. And she was kind of my constant of people that was part of my journey. And I remember going to her and feeling like I really wanted to see a therapist. I really felt like I needed mental health support. And I went to her and I was like, hey, do you know anyone I can talk to? Because I was really struggling. And she gave me the name of someone. And in my head, I was like, oh, well, this person doesn't really focus on women who don't have kids. So I sort of talked myself out of calling anyone. And I think that there was part of me that had a lot of shame that I couldn't figure it out on my own. And I didn't really hear anyone talk about what happens when you don't have the baby. What happens when you think about adoption, because we did, my husband and I looked into adoption, but in the back of my head, I was like, gosh, I don't know if I can continue a new journey of something that's not a guaranteed outcome. And that was something that I felt really shameful about admitting, because I think most people, when you tell them that you don't have kids or that you couldn't have kids, their first thing is, oh, well, you can always adopt. And I felt embarrassed to tell people like, I don't think I can, or that's not the right decision for me, because I thought that they'd look at me and think, oh, well, you clearly didn't want to be a mom bad enough if you would say no to an option like that. So that caused me to just stay really silent. And it wasn't until the pandemic when I worked in, the medical field, and I was spent most of my time in an operating room, and we did more elective surgeries. And so the ORs were closed down, and I was not able to escape life and do my job 16 hours a day. I would find any opportunity to work because that was the thing that gave me a lot of gratification, and I felt successful in something, because I felt not successful in being a woman who couldn't reproduce. So it was when the pandemic came that I was like, I got to figure this out. I just felt like I didn't know myself anymore. I had all this time to spend with my husband, and I felt like we weren't really connected as a couple without work stuff to talk about. And I thought, gosh, how are we going to spend the next 40 or 50 years? Is our marriage going to be enough? So I think a lot of women who don't have kids question, are we going to be enough as a couple? So it was when I discovered a weight loss coach who I didn't even know what life coaching was or anything of the sort, who helped me get some of that weight off from my fertility treatments, about 25 pounds that I just hung on to because I gave up on my body. To be honest, I just didn't want to work out because I was so angry with my body. I didn't want to take supplements because anytime I opened my supplement drawer, it reminded me of my IVF drawer with all my medications. So when I started working with her, she gave me this perspective that I was carrying this story that didn't necessarily have to be true about me, about what life could be like if you don't have children and you couldn't create a child. And that's when the alarm bells went off that, wow, there's a message out here that a lot of people haven't heard before, and maybe I could be the one to start telling it.
Gosh. I can relate to a lot that you're talking about, a little differently, obviously. For those who listen to our first podcast, know that I am childless by choice, with my own sort of fertility journey that sort of brought that decision on, or part of it. But I can definitely relate to you, and I think that one of the reasons we talk about so much in the fertility space of we need to stop asking people if they have kids, or probing deeper, or saying inappropriate things like, well, why? Or, man, you're getting older. Shouldn't, you should be thinking about that. There's that second question that happens. But even as somebody who has decided not to have kids or has never even tried, I get uncomfortable when people ask me, because it's almost like there's this perceived that I should. And if I don't, I'm less than, right? So
True.
it's, whether you're childless by choice or not by choice, they're very different and very different journeys, but it's there either way, whether you made the choice or not, of, just what society, almost this like pressure, this piece that just is, like you said, just is not talked about enough.
Yeah, one of the most downloaded things from my website, I created a free guide called the top 27 things people say when you're childless, because I think so many of us get rattled by these questions, or people assume whether it was something that you tried for, desired, or, people have health conditions that prevent them from even wanting it. Some people have traumatic childhoods where they're just not seeking parenthood because they have such trauma from things they experienced as children. So there's so many different things that people have experienced that might lead you to a place where you don't have kids. And I really think that so many people assume that that is the ultimate place to be when you are a female with organs, reproductive organs or not, because we all know there are some people that are born in without the organs that they need to reproduce naturally. But it's oftentimes really an opportunity that I've taken now that I'm more comfortable in my conversation to educate people, and not in a way that shames them from asking that type of question, but lets them know, this might not be an appropriate question or something that you should assume is right for everybody.
Yeah. 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 I've gotten to the point where I literally just immediately say by choice, just because I don't want to have to explain, or I don't want those questions that then come up. But yeah, it's just not talked about enough. And it's this, society puts this pressure that that's just what we're supposed to do. And it's not. You can have a very fulfilled life, not whether, you made that choice or it was unfortunately made for you in one way or another.
which I think you speak to too in what you're doing, which I think is so needed as fertility treatment becomes more and more prevalent. More people are needing fertility treatment potentially to have children, or at least attempt to. There's more and more people deciding not to have children. And so I think just the more people talk about it, the more it normalizes it, right? And it you can be a voice for people who maybe don't feel comfortable speaking about it, which
Yeah.
I think is so needed.
Yeah, I think a lot of women feel like they are always going to live this life as outsiders if they don't have commonalities with their friends with kids. And if they go to, say, a girls' night and everyone's talking about their experiences parenting their kids or what sports their kids are in. And in the beginning, that was hard for me to do. Is sit in those rooms. And even though I knew my friends loved me and cared for me, but at the same time, I also, as I became more settled and proud of who I was as someone who didn't have kids, but didn't need to have that be my defining thing of whether I fit in or not, I started to see that people were interested in what I was doing. And even if I couldn't, chime in on when they were up at 3 a.m. with a sick kid, they were interested in what I had going on in my life too. And I think a lot of women often think of themselves as not being able to belong because they don't have the same exact replica of a life as their other friends. But I really have seen my friends be like, oh my gosh, so interested in like, what are you doing? Like, what do you and Jack have planned? Oh, you're building this house for two instead of building a house for, us and kids. And I think we often select ourselves out as childless people that we just can't have our friends with kids. And I disagree. Like I love my mom friends. And I think it adds a great dimension to our friendship that we have differences of what we're doing in our lives.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. As you've kind of stepped out, beyond your own journey, you've obviously met a community of women who are in this situation. And I think so many of them have been quiet, right? Having those feelings similar to yours. But what have you seen now that you've kind of stepped into this role of being, a coach for those women and advocating for, you can have a really fulfilling life without children? Like, tell me a little bit about what that's looked like and who you've met.
I've met people across the world, which is one of the greatest gifts, I think, of the internet and of social media, the love-hate relationship I know I have with social media, where I'm like, or my husband who's like, oh my God, are you on TikTok or on Instagram again? And I'm like, just zip it. But, for me, it's just given me an opportunity to see how much connection people are searching for and just wanting to have some sort of idea of where they can start with creating this life that they feel connected to. Because when the message that you always hear is that you won't know love until you have a baby, or you wouldn't understand because you're not a mom, you just take on this idea that your life is just always going to be missing something. And so while I speak openly and I think I've been a thought provoker for people to say, oh, here's this woman in Chicago who just, happened to be on a similar journey than mine, and she's doing this, this, and this. It doesn't mean people have to do the same things or be excited about the same things that I'm doing. But I think it's just that idea that there are people out there who have found their way. And it all starts with understanding what is the story that you are telling. And I do this usually in my first class when I start with a new client is, tell me about your story. When somebody asks you about you, what is the story that you tell? And do you like the way you are portraying yourself in that story? And oftentimes people are like not even aware that they could see themselves differently. And the truth is, when we tell a story, it's all full of the beliefs that we have about ourselves. And our beliefs, we can choose. There is absolutely no one who can tell me to believe something about myself that I don't want to believe. And sure, it's hard when you've lived in a society that glorifies certain things or says this way is the right way. But when you start to understand that you can believe something and you don't have to tell someone you believe it, you can just believe it about you and keep moving along, you realize how much agency you have over the story that you believe about yourself. And so there's so many people that just realize, oh my gosh, I don't have to feel like I don't know love, or that my life isn't fulfilling because I don't have kids. Yeah, it's not what I thought it was going to be, but what are the things that I'm experiencing that feel good for me? And what is the story that I want to believe about me? So I think our story is one of the biggest things that a lot of people have really been able to start that new pathway to deciding, what do they want to fill their story with? What do they want to be doing? What do they want to be thinking about themselves and showing up in this world?
I like starting with a reframe, right? Because it just it starts with you. You've got to start believing that your story matters, that your journey matters, your life matters, what you're doing matters. And I think that reframe you start just project that, and you can start learning how to have very meaningful relationships and conversations and things. So I love that. I think I could take some of that myself even.
I was like, I could apply that in other
I
situations.
know. I was like, I feel like I should start doing that.
It's so true. And we just never stop to think, like, do I like the way that I portray myself in my life?
Yeah.
And yeah, there's things that you wish would be different, or things that you want to achieve that you might not have achieved yet. But let's focus on the things that I am showing up as in my life and glorify them instead of belittle them, because no one's telling us we have to believe that about ourselves. We just assume we do.
Yeah.
It makes me think of a few weeks ago when Dr. Lawson was on here and talking about, like, her kind of ending statement was, if your best friend, if heard you saying the things that you're saying to yourself, like if you were your best friend, you would say, don't say that about my best friend. Like, that's not true. And I think kind of shifting into that perspective, like, you would never say that about someone that you love and care about.
Mm-hmm.
So why do we allow ourselves to talk
Yeah.
to each other that way, or to ourselves that way?
Yeah. I think one of the kind of shifting a little bit, but I think one of the topics we wanted to talk about, and can lean into some of the other stuff that you're doing, is we wanted to talk about Mother's Day. I think we say Mother's Day right now because the holiday is coming up. At the time people are going to listen to this, it's going to be a week or so away. But I think this, we'll speak to that directly, but I think this, you insert any holiday, any date, right, that has that some sort of meaning to you, or brings you back to the point where you don't have kids, whether you're currently in a journey and still there's another Mother's Day that goes by, or another holiday or another date that goes by that you had hoped that this was going to be your year, that this was going to be your date, or you're out of your journey and you're navigating life as a childless individual or person or couple. So I would love to have you talk, a little bit more about, like, how do you talk with your clients or just other people about these holidays, but we can specifically obviously talk about Mother's Day and just kind of, navigating around these certain dates.
Yeah, you make a really good point. I think holidays in general, when life isn't in the way that you thought it was going to be, i.e. for me, being a mom, there was just these visions that I had of waking up on Mother's Day and having the pancakes made for me and a cute little handwritten card, or something that your kids worked on in school, and these little treasures that I remember my mom having from us, my sister and I, as kids, and things that were just always prominent in our house, that were reminders of how we played a role in her life as a mom. So when Mother's Day would come around during my fertility journey, I remember it was a sad but hopeful feeling that I had. Like, oh, sad that it didn't happen this year, but I at least had this continuous journey that said, well, maybe there's next year. So I had 7 years of maybe next year's during my fertility journey. And, having my mom around was helpful. And, my sister had littles at that time. So I felt like I had some sort of connection to what that feeling might feel like, knowing in the back of my head that one day it would happen. That was kind of the narrative, like, oh, next year, this is going to be me, and this is what we're going to do. And so during that time, what I started doing, and I still do even now that my journey has ended is I decided to host. And for me, hosting a Mother's Day brunch at my house for my sister and my mom, and we've now lost my mother-in-law, but she would come over, and it helped keep my mind off things and allowed me to feel festive. And I'd set the table and, do the flowers and homemade pastries and things like that. So for me, that was a way to keep my mind off things and keep busy, but still feel like I had a connection to, the women in my life and celebrating them. And then when my journey ended, it was not just when it ended, because I got the news about our frozen embryo having trisomy 16 back in 2018. So it was 2022 when I was leaving Target, and it was late April of 2022, and all the Mother's Day banners were out. And I remember coming home and just feeling like, well, what's going to happen when my mom and my sister aren't around to celebrate in the same way? And my niece and nephew are grown up and they're off doing their own things, or my sister's a grandmother and she's celebrating with her grandkids. So I had all these feelings of loneliness of what the future might hold. And I came home from Target that day and I started a meetup group, because I was like, I want to put together a brunch the Saturday before Mother's Day and see if there's any other childless women, by choice or not by choice, in Chicago. And I started that meetup group, and I rented the party room in my condo building, and 18 women showed up. And most of them I never met. There was a couple people I knew in my work environment that I knew didn't have kids, so I invited them. But it was just this really beautiful energy, and it wasn't like angry of, oh, we're against moms, or, boo-hoo on Mother's Day. It was just this feeling of, oh my gosh, like I can walk in a room and feel like I belong. And there was no questions asked of why didn't you adopt, or where are you on your journey? Some people came, there's two right now that I can think of that came that first year who are now moms, and they, we're still on a trying to conceive journey. So my only requirement is to not be pregnant when you come, but you can still be looking to conceive. It's just anyone who wants to feel connected around Mother's Day weekend. So that is when I started the Others Day. And this year, again, it's the days leading up to Mother's Day. It's now a 2-day event. Friday, I'm doing yoga, guided meditation, and a sound bath on Friday night. And then Saturday is the brunch. And it's just a way for women to feel like they have a place where they can celebrate themselves and meet other women without kids, and, feel this connection to something that historically might have been hard. And one of the greatest things I hear time and time again from people is they'll follow up and say, wow, Mother's Day, which is Sunday, that next day, felt so different this year. I used to dread Mother's Day. I used to feel like so sad, or I wouldn't even leave the house. And they tell me like they were just on such a high from being in a room where they felt so much love and acceptance. So that is what has become the Others Day. We did our first international Others Day in Dublin, Ireland this year, because they celebrate Mother's Day in March.
That's cool.
Yeah. So a woman, again, I met through social media. She has a podcast, and she had invited me to be a guest, I don't know, about a year or so ago. And we were talking about the Others Day, and she reached out this year and she's like, I'd love to bring this to Dublin, Ireland. So it's now, I could call an international event, but it's just turned into something really beautiful. And it's May 8th and 9th this year in Chicago.
That's
so cool.
And I imagine, like, right, it's only been a few years of you doing this. I can see over the next 10 years, 20 years, right, maybe this being done in multiple cities across the US, across the world, and inspired by you, Lana. I mean, that's what an accomplishment, and what an amazing gift to offer women who are struggling during this time, whether their journey's ended or not. Like, it is such a hard holiday for so many in the fertility community, and outside.
People are always like, my gosh, like, it's so amazing. Like, how do you do this? And I'm like, you just do it. If you're searching for it, like, from everything from when my podcast started and I hit record on that first episode in 2021, or the Others Day, or deciding to go to life coaching certification. Like, it's something that I needed for myself. And I figured there are other people too. And I always encourage people, like, I don't want to be alone in this space. Like, you do it too. Like, let's all join forces and create something that you feel you need. If it isn't in your like forefront, go create it. And nothing that I've done is because I'm a multimillionaire. I have this amount of money dropped on my lap. Like, everything literally has come from a place of desire to have something like this in my life. And I think no matter whether you're in the fertility space or whatever you're doing in your life, like, just go out and create it. And I bet you someone's going to come. And so as we embark on this Others Day, I'm just amazed. Women fly from across the country. People have come from Puerto Rico, from Seattle, Washington, Massachusetts. Like, people just want to feel connected. And it's just because I created it and came home from Target that day and decided to do something about it.
Oh, that's so cool. I think that as you were saying earlier, I mean, we all have our love-hate relationship with social media. But in instances like this, you can really see the beauty of being able to reach people that you would never otherwise encounter, right? And you've given a voice to so many women, men too, right, who are fatherless, not by choice, right? Who have felt lonely, and now they have a voice. And I don't know anyone else out there, Lana, that's advocating in the way that you are. I just think it's such an amazing thing that you're doing for people.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, my when I wrote my book last year, it's called So Now What. I think you mentioned that in the intro. I did a chapter on Mother's Day, and I also did one on Father's Day.
I was going to say, yeah, we haven't
Yeah.
talked about the dads, but they're a
Yeah.
part of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
while I don't necessarily support men in my coaching practice, I really help those who have a male partner in their life figure out, like, on Father's Day, is your partner grieving? You know, that was something I never really thought about when I was going through fertility
Yeah.
treatments. It was all about me failing and my body not working right, and me having, you know, the transfer that failed. And I never stopped to understand that my husband was grieving too. And not to ever make a generalization, but like, for him, he just would never talk about it to me. And I think it was compounding of him just not talking much about his emotions, but him also seeing how hard it was for me and not wanting to add the burden to me. And so I really try, when Father's Day is coming up, to like ask him, you know, what do you want to do on Father's Day? Is there something special you want to do? Do you want to go somewhere? Do you want to get out of town? Do you want to get dinner or, you know, brunch with your dad? Like, what are the things that will make you feel connected on Father's Day? And I think that was a part of the equation. I carried a lot of guilt into this, you know, portion of life where I became more aware of what I had been through and started talking more openly, that I never really paid attention to what my husband was going through.
I think that's true in the fertility journey as a whole. I think men are often forgotten, right? We kind of think of them as, well, they have one job to do, right? and and I think men are really good at masking their emotions and not showing how they may be feeling, or they're trying to be strong for their partner as they're watching them go through this, you know, physical process of, you know, whether that's IVF or not. And so they don't really talk about what they're experiencing. Having your husband see all of the work that you've done, has he been able to express, you know, through time, like how he felt as you were on that journey? Or, you know,
He still doesn't really talk about it. And it's been something I've worked a lot through, because I know that he's very supportive of the work I do. And I want him to talk about it more, but I have to also respect the fact that
Sure.
he is who he is, and to give
Yeah.
him the space to process how he wants to process things. And he just doesn't want to talk about it. And what's interesting though, when I run into patients of his, because his practice is here in Chicago, they'll be like, oh my gosh, your husband's so proud of you. Your husband talks about you all the time. Or, and I'm like, really? Because I know he's proud of me. He tells me that as we're home, but in order for him to be proud of me, he's got to talk about what he's proud of. So I do know that he's out there, talking about the things that I'm doing and the way that I'm making a mark for women who are childless after IVF. But as far as him talking from a man's perspective of what it felt like, I've just come to peace with the fact that that isn't part of who he is, and that's okay.
I think this brings up just a big point to fertility treatment or even after, just having that open line of communication with just your partner, your significant other, but even potentially, family members that know, what you've gone through, or even not, just like where you are. I think it's asking the other person, whoever that is, what would you need today? Like, I want to do something for you, with you. It's acknowledging that, like, hey, I want to celebrate you wherever you are in life journey, your decisions. And that, again, that could be a partner, significant other, family, friend, the other's day, like, somebody mentioning, listening to this podcast could be like, hey, there's this event. I heard about it. You should check it out. I think just openly having those conversations and acknowledging where somebody is or decisions they've made or whatever, I think is really powerful. And I don't think it's something we do enough, whether in the fertility journey or outside of it.
Yeah.
Advocacy
I do
with
get
a
a lot
little
of people.
Yeah.
I do get a lot of people that reach out and they're like, hey, my daughter's going through fertility treatments and I don't know how to support her.
Yeah.
Or I had someone contact me through my website and be like, my granddaughter just found out that she's not going to be a mom. Like, what resources are
Yeah.
out there? And so I think that the conversation, people just don't know what to say. So
Yeah.
oftentimes they will stay silent. And we, as the people searching for support, sometimes feel like people aren't acknowledging us or maybe aren't compassionate. But I think a lot of it just comes from there's not a lot of language out there. And I love that people,
we don't even know how to ask for help or what we even want to ask for, right?
And it's such a taboo topic for so many people. And I even am very aware when I meet people who are still on their IVF journey, I sometimes hesitate about telling them what I do because I think, oh my gosh, like, I don't want them to fear ending up like me. And I remember being through that and being like, oh my God, I don't know what I would do if this doesn't work out. And then there's a part of me that's like, well, what if they do need this support? And there's this person that they met one day and they remember the conversation they had with me and say, oh, there is somewhere I can go for support. So it's kind of this dance that you have to do of, you talked about it with Dr. Lawson on your episode, which I listened to, about like staying positive and hopeful and all these things that society tells us we need to have this positive energy and mindset when we're going through IVF. But at some point there's got to be a reality of, well, what if I do need support and this doesn't work? So I'm just always aware and careful how I talk about the work that I do in front of people who are still on navigating their fertility journey.
Yeah. No one wants to talk about like the things that may not go right. But the reality of it is, for a lot of people, and if more people had talked about it, like, maybe it wouldn't be so taboo. Maybe we wouldn't feel like we failed and it was us. You know what I mean? Like, I agree with you. There's this balance of maintaining hope, but also setting expectations, and also that it's not the end of your life or the world if certain things happen, and that you can have a very fulfilled life. It just may look different than you wanted it to or expected.
Yeah. And a lot of the reason I got involved with ASRM and have been connecting with fertility doctors and fertility nurses is to help give them some language that they can use when they see that a patient might be nearing the end of their journey. And instead of just talking about adoption or surrogacy or donor, acknowledge that childlessness might be the right path for you, and it might be a lot for you to think about now, but let us know if that is where you end up, because we want to support you and provide resources for that too. So I've been doing trainings and talks at different clinics, both in the US and Canada, and helping them figure out when do they bring that up in conversations, or how at the end of, say, a cycle review, ask a patient, would you like us to follow up with you in 3 months or 6 months, and get the consent from the patient? Because I'll sometimes have doctors tell me, oh, well, we don't want patients to feel like we're being predatory and only reaching out to see if they want to do another cycle. But I think when you get patient consent of, hey, I just gave you a lot of information today. Would you like us to check in on you and just see where you are with your decision process? And the patient feels like they had a say in it. And maybe it's just like a my chart, a message on the patient portal of, we wanted to check in and let us know if we can offer anything else to you, and not push another cycle or push something that is pointing towards, more of a parenthood journey, but just a little bit more benign as far as what you're asking and offering patients.
I never really thought about it that way, from the perspective of how how clinics may feel like, oh, if we're reaching out to patients, at that point, that we are being predatory and trying to, okay, right, let's go into the next thing. Maybe that is donor or whatever that is. But I think, so there's like this, it seems like there's this balance. And as we're talking, I'm like, well, what about if we see somebody getting to that point in their journey, like offering a therapist or a coach, somebody to say, okay, let's sit down and let's talk about the options that you've been presented, right? Donor, adoption, just childless, and like what makes sense for you, and help somebody process that decision, because it's very highly emotional. And I think you need help processing. And we've talked about this before, Ashley, like I think as women, I think you kind of spoke to this in your journey, Lana, like I think we just power through. We're like, okay, I mean, I'll just power through. I'll do what I got to do. And it doesn't leave room to kind of like feel those emotions, which are a part of the grieving process, and needed to, like, we need to grieve, right, in order to be able to move forward.
For sure. And I think a lot of the women that work with me are used to being successful in their lives, career driven, or, successful at something that, when they can't achieve their dream of biological motherhood, it's like everything else has just taken a back seat. Any success you've had in your life is just not as important as being able to create a child. And so for me, I just didn't want people in my workplace to know that I couldn't have a baby, because I was like, oh, well, they're not going to see me as this driven, successful person anymore. And a lot of times it's this compounding effect of, okay, I just can't do anything well anymore. So I'm not going to try new things. I'm not going to interview for a new job. I'm not going to find something that I could potentially fail at, because doing that is just going to be one more thing that I wasn't successful doing. And so a lot of women feel very frozen in their lives because they don't want to put themselves out there to try and do something new that they might not know a clear pathway to success.
Yeah. It's a really good call out. Coming back to like Mother's Day, or, just in general, sort of like, how does one, I don't know. I think there's a set of people, and maybe they're listening and maybe they're supporting someone going through a journey, or maybe they're a parent or a grandparent of somebody, like, and I'm sure you talk about this with clients, but like, how does one acknowledge, but also celebrate if they are a mom, right? Like, or even celebrating your mom, right? Like, we have moms, hope, if they're still around, you're celebrating your own Mother's Day, but then you're navigating your own feelings around the holiday. And again, we could insert any holiday, talk about Father's Day, the same sort of thing. Like, how does one, and it's probably different for everybody, but like, what are some like tips or stuff that you talk about with clients of how to navigate that, of still celebrating your mom or dad or whatever, while still acknowledging what you're going through, or even somebody else knowing what you're going through or decisions you've made, or a positive pregnancy test and it's a friend of yours, you know what I mean? Insert whatever that just sort of triggers a response. How do we still celebrate those moments while also acknowledging our own journey?
Yeah, well, I think just because a celebration has always taken place in the same way, it doesn't have to always continue in that way. I think that's the thing. Like, even when you think about like Christmas and the way that, you know, your family has celebrated Christmas morning or Christmas Eve and Mother's Day, you know, insert whatever holiday, because I really think it's universal, is just deciding, might this be the year that things change a little bit? Might, instead of, you know, seeing my mom on Mother's Day, do I see her a different day knowing that she, you know, might have something else going on? Do I get her a gift certificate for a massage and facial and send her off to do something that she feels pampered, because I'm not at a place right now where I can be around for Mother's Day? And I think that a lot of people are worried about disappointing others. So in turn, we disappoint ourselves instead. And we put ourselves in situations that feel really fragile for us, for fear that somebody else might not be happy or might not have what they visioned. So I think number one, it's looking at yourself and saying, you know what, this Mother's Day, I want to focus on what is going to make me feel supported. And that might mean not seeing my mom today, or it might mean skipping church. A lot of people have trouble going to church on Mother's Day, or other, you know, faith-based places, because a lot of emphasis is put on mothers. And not that you're in opposition of moms, but when you envisioned yourself being part of that prayer group or part of the blessing in a church service, people get really emotional who wanted to be moms and couldn't. So maybe church isn't the best place for you to go on Mother's Day. So I think it's having the ability to look at what you need and put that first, and not worry about whether somebody else's feelings are hurt, because you need to support yourself right now. And then, you know, depending on what your communication lines are, maybe there's an explanation that goes to it. And, you know, Mom, I love you so much. And I know we usually do X, Y, and Z on Mother's Day, but is it okay if this year we do something different? And maybe there'll be moms who don't get it and don't understand, and that's their journey. You know, they need to figure that out. But I think if most moms would be like, honey, you know, I know this must be so hard for you. I love you. But telling someone what you're going through sometimes is the hardest thing, because we expect to not be understood. We expect, because somebody never had to go through fertility treatments, or, you know, your mom popped out 4 kids without even trying, that they wouldn't understand. But I think people are much more compassionate than we allow ourselves to believe. And sometimes it's just leading with that. So I think recognizing what feels right or safe for you, and then communicating about it if you feel like it's a place that you can do that.
And I think we could apply that to the context too of things like baby showers, right? I hear, or, you know, family members who have gotten pregnant and you're either still in your journey or your journey has ended. Like, I've had clients that I've worked with who are like, oh my gosh, I feel like a horrible person because my sister just told me she's pregnant. And of course you're happy for her, but at the same time, it just feels like a gut punch. Like, why not me? Why?
Well, there were so many times when I felt that during my fertility journey. Like, one of my girlfriends and I were going through treatments at the same time, and she ended up, her embryo split, and she has identical girl twins, and my heart was broken. But then I was kind of happy for her. Like, I wanted to be happy for her, but in my heart, I was like, oh my gosh, not only did this work for her, she gets 2 kids without even, you know, trying for twins. And so I think there's a lot of judgment that I carried around, that I was this like bitter, angry person. And it made me feel really uncomfortable, but also all the more isolated from the people that I was used to feeling so comfortable and easy to be around that I just pulled myself away from them because I thought, who am I turning into? Like, this is not me. I'm like usually the most like excited, fun person that you could be around. And now I'm like jealous that my friend got pregnant with twins. So I think there's a lot of self judgment that rolls into this, but it's like separating and saying, it's not that person that you're jealous of, it's the experience that they are having. And that has nothing to do with them. It isn't something that they, have a leg up on you because they did something different than you did. It just is an experience that's different for them than it is for you. So I think there's a lot of people that carry around that self-judgment, not only when they're going through their journey, but even after, when you hear someone say, oh, we weren't even trying and I got pregnant. And you thought, damn, I went through 7 years of this. And I never got to once have a pregnancy test say positive.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a reality.
Yeah, I think so many people need to hear this, that we need to give ourselves permission to say no, to not go, to put ourselves first. And, as a people pleaser like myself, that feels selfish to some people, of like, well, I'm supposed to be doing X, Y, and Z, or I need to be doing this. And then sometimes the reality of it is no. And it's okay for me to say no to an event, to not do something, to, feel the way I'm feeling about a situation, and give ourselves permission that in this moment, this is what I need. This is how I'm feeling. It is valid.
And it doesn't make you a bad person.
And it doesn't make you a bad person. Yeah.
Yeah. And this could even work on Mother's Day. It's something that I teach my coaching clients when it comes to like your best friend's kid's birthday party, or, your cousin's kid's birthday party, or a baby shower. Segment the event out and be like, okay, I'm just going to go and I'm going to drop off a gift. And that's like, okay, I'm going to drop that gift off. I'm going to see, how do I feel about sticking around? For example, when it's usually like a baby shower, there's usually a game part, do I want to stick around? Do I feel okay enough to hang out for the game? Reevaluate. When that game's over, be like, okay, I think I hit my max. I'm out of here, or I'm going to stick around for the lunch. And then decide, when you're having the food, do I want to stick around for the opening of the presents? For some people, that's too much. So really realizing, like, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It can be nothing. You can, have an imaginary event that you didn't know was going to be on the same day that happened to be on the same day. And that's okay. You could wake up sick that morning and not be able to go. That, those are okay things to do.
Yeah.
But if you decide, like, I feel like I want to give this a shot, you don't have to think about it as a full event. Like, break it up into those segments and just do this check-in with yourself and say, do I want to continue on with the next thing? And if you don't, like, haul out of there. You got a random phone call, your alarm's going off in the house. You got to run home and turn the alarm off. There's things, but I think we get overwhelmed to say yes, knowing that, we have no escape out of it. And even sometimes when you get invited to the shower or the birthday and you don't want to go, picking out the present. I know people who will shop for you. There are some people in the childless community that I know that are like, hey, send me the address, tell me how much you want to spend, and I'll go on the registry and send a baby gift for you under your name. And I think, there were times when walking through Target was really hard for me, and going through the maternity section, because I just dreamed of myself being that mannequin with the cute little outfit on, or passing the strollers and being like, oh, am I going to get a bugaboo? Am I going to get this stroller, that stroller? So there were times when just walking through Target was really hard for me as somebody who was still in my fertility journey.
Yeah. I remember when I was in it, and I think I've said this on the podcast before, but I would see some random stranger who was pregnant, and I immediately was like, well, what the hell? Like, why am I not them? And what I always try to keep in mind is, you don't know what that person went through, what they went through to get there. And I think that's an important perspective for anyone to have, right? Whether you're navigating treatment or, I think we're just kind of on the topic of judgment, right? We there's a lot of judgment around like what family building should look like and how we get there. And, hopefully conversations like this and this podcast and your podcast, Lana, like your book, like hopefully this is educational, and like we need to stop judging people for, their life choices or not life choices, and what their life looks like. It's their life.
Yeah, I think going on this trying to conceive and then childless after IVF journey made me so much more aware of that, of not everyone's life happens the way that they thought it was going to happen. And not every outcome was a beautiful story to get to the outcome. And I think I lived a lot of my life with those blinders on of not knowing and just assuming like everyone's life just happened and it must have been a great story. And I'm so much more compassionate and aware through my infertility diagnosis and knowing all that we've been through since that diagnosis happened in 2011.
I want to say, like, we use the word family building a lot in every, journeys or otherwise, but I do just like make a point that, family can be two people. Family can be whatever family is for you, right? And I'm sure you speak to that a lot, Lana, but can you talk a little bit about people that you work with, like how you help them? Like you talked about the first stage and kind of talking about yourself or talking about your story in a different way. But like, what are some like maybe practical tips that you help people? Now it's just the two of us, and you talked about, with your husband, we only talked about work and, all these, like, how do you get to that point of like, okay, my family is this, whatever that looks like, and this is what it's going to be. Like what are some like tips to like have that fulfilled life with whatever that family looks like that it maybe didn't look like you had hoped?
Yeah, well, it takes planning. And that is the part that sometimes feels like it's a heavy lift, because for people who don't have children, we often look at those who have children and say, they have these automatic milestones that are built in. And whether that's true or not, we could argue that or not argue that. But there is like, okay, well, at this age, my kid's going to go to school. So we want to be in X, area or school system. Then we've got to make decisions of sports and what we're going to do on the weekends. It seems like there's a lot of things that are part of the parenthood pathway that seem like there's these automatic lapses of time that you just sort of chunk into. And when there aren't those parenting milestones, like helping your kid figure out where they want to go to college or what they want to do, or if they get married, or if you become a grandparent, for me, I felt very overwhelmed by all this free time. And people would be like, oh, you're so lucky. You can do whatever you want when you wake up on Saturday. You can do this. And to me, it didn't feel like a luxury. I was very overwhelmed by waking up and making sure that what I talked about when I got to work on Monday felt as meaningful as what I saw the parents that were in my life talking about on Monday when they were sharing about their weekend. So there was a lot of overwhelming feeling of how am I going to fill my time for the next 40, 50, 60 years in a way that I pick and do the things that make me feel proud of how I'm spending my time. So I think a lot of the women that I've worked with share that similar overwhelmment with how do I choose to do things that I feel proud of, that I feel purposeful doing, that I feel like my life is going to have some sort of legacy behind the things that I'm doing. So a lot of that is just goal setting. And my husband and I do that around our anniversary. I like to show this little piggy bank that I keep by my desk. And we started, this piggy bank is in 2013. So this was still during our fertility journey. I think it was probably a after New Year's clearance item that I picked up. I love to shop the end caps of Target where everything's marked down. And we started dropping little ideas or notes or things that, we experienced that we want to do together, or things that we did together that were super fun. And then at the end of that year of our next anniversary, like we read through all those things. And we're like,
That's so
oh,
fun.
like, let's do that again. Or, so-and-so told us about their vacation to Zion National Park. Like, let's plan that trip this year. Let's do these things. So for our anniversary, we really use that as like a goal setting time of, these are the things that we want to do. And it could be professional, it could be personal, it could be us together, but it's kind of this like piggy bank of ideas to help us plot out some of the things that we find interesting, and we don't necessarily want to make that decision right now, but we throw it in the piggy bank, and then we sit there and we go through things and be like, yeah, like, let's do that, or let's put that on the calendar for 2 years from now, or save up for this. So I think one of the things that I help my clients do is sort of figure out, how do I create that plotting of time so that time just doesn't run into time and run into time and run into time, because it feels like there's nothing that you have to make a decision by, because it's not connected to certain milestones that we often see parents having. So it's just, a lot of it is experimenting. I'll even tell people it may be as simple as somebody was like, oh, I went to solid core and oh my gosh, it was like the best workout. So it's like, okay, well, if that's like something you'd like to do, like, do it. Figure out a time in your calendar. Like, when are you going to go to your free, solid core class? Because most places give a free class away, if you're first time coming. So saying yes to things and not just saying, oh, I'll do it one day.
Yeah.
So I hope that wasn't too much of a tangent, but that's
No,
I loved it.
That is such a cool idea. I want to do this now.
I know.
I'm gonna go get a clearance.
Look at yourself a little bit, or if you have one from your kid, Laura, you just say, hey, I'll keep your money somewhere else. I'm using the piggy bank. Yeah, I love our little guy here. He's
and you don't open it up until your anniversary. So like, it's kind of like, you don't know what each other is putting in there, and then you open. That's so cool. I bet that's such a fun night too.
It is,
like, opening that up.
Yeah, and it started out, we started doing it on New Year's, and then it kind of morphed into our anniversary, because it just sort of felt like a good shift. But when we first started out, it was cute little things like, oh, thanks for making a great dinner tonight. And it was like little thank yous, or, oh, I loved our date. We went to the Shakespeare Theater, and, you look so pretty tonight. And he'd like throw a cute little note in. So, and then it's just sort of morphed into us trying, to create milestones. So we're finally building, one of our long-term dreams was building a house on Lake Michigan. And so we bought land in Grand Haven, Michigan. And
beautiful.
we're
awesome.
building a beach house for two. It was
Love
everything we looked at when we were wanting to get a lake house. Everything had like 8 bedrooms and bunk beds and packed for families. And it just didn't feel like something that felt like ours. So we decided that we were going to build our own. So the driveway is being built right now. And
awesome.
we're super excited, to create that dream for us, for the life that we have together as a couple.
Yeah.
And our dog, Coco.
Oh. Well, I just love that you've taken this painful experience and turned it into this powerful movement. And I just, please keep being loud in this space. I think you're a voice for so many women who are scared to speak up or feel alone. And so even if somebody's not ready to maybe reach out to you or to, talk about it, I think just being able to hear or pick up your book, right? Like, I'm sure you can tell us where you can get your book.
Yes, you can get it online at Amazon, at Barnes and Noble. Here's my pretty little book cover. And on my website, I talk about when I created the cover for my book, it was really important. There's like 5 hidden elements of my cover that you can learn about on my website, lanamanikowski.com. But for me, you can get it on Amazon, and local bookstores can order it for you if they don't stock it, which was one of the things when I was trying to get my book into bookstores. I would go into bookstores and I would say, can you show me your area that talks about infertility? And not one had an area focused on infertility. And,
Wow.
maybe the books weren't out there. I know, Dr. Lucky just came out with a book. Dr. Crawford just came out with a book, some big names in the fertility space. But we need to have places in bookstores. So if you go into a local bookstore, ask them first, like, where is your section on infertility? Because it's such a huge thing that we are experiencing, where 1 in 6 women are getting a diagnosis of infertility, or 1 in 6 people, because we know that data is showing that almost half of the infertile diagnosis are men. But we need to have more resources out there. So, yeah, let's push the needle. I'm a needle pusher. So
Love
Same.
it. Love it.
That's it. And again, we talked about
needle.
we talked all about advocacy on last week's episode. And again, that's a great way that you can advocate in. It may feel like a small way, but I think, I'm sure Barnes and Noble doesn't really think about, like, there's a whole community of people who could benefit from this type of literature. And so even just going into your local library, local bookstore, and saying, hey, as you said, where is this section? Where can I find this book? Like, we could start the conversation.
Yeah.
That's such
it
really is.
And it needs to be a section, just like you have, your romance novels, and you have fiction and nonfiction and kids and all that. Like, there is just so much out there, or so much need out there, but we're just not seeing the resources that people are searching for. So yeah, let's all do it together.
Yeah. Well, you're creating it. So thank you so much for coming on and talking about this topic. I know it's not easy. It's not an easy topic to talk and listen about, but I do think it's an important conversation, and it's one that we need to keep having. And so we just really appreciate you coming on, Lana. Is there I would love for you to leave, obviously tell us where people can find you, but then any, parting words, especially, thinking about that this episode's going to air, close to Mother's Day, like what advice do you have?
Yeah, I would just, reiterate, like, take care of you this year, really listen to what you need. And if what you need means staying home, stay home, and don't judge yourself for not having the desire or the ability to go out and celebrate on something that can feel really hard. But also, search for community. And I think with the Others Day, that is really what I love seeing, is women who come in as strangers. They don't know anyone in that room. They don't have a friend that they're coming with. But if you feel like you want to find connection, you just might have to look for it and, reach out to me. I'm always, like, linking people up. If I know someone who lives in a city and they're like, hey, do you know anyone in your community who, lives in Vancouver? There's a chance I might know somebody. And I'll do, like, e-introductions and just introduce people over social media or an email with their consent. And there's people out there. I think you just have to be willing to say, I want to meet them. I want to know where more people like me exist, and you'll find them.
I love it. And where can people find you, Lana?
So I'm most active on Instagram, lana.manikowski. And then my website, lanamanikowski.com. And then I'll share some links to that resource I told you about, the top 27 things people say when you're childless, because I have some
Everybody
ideas
needs
of how
that.
to respond. Some ways, that you can feel comfortable in how you respond. So it'll all be in the show notes, I'm sure.
Yes, absolutely. We'll drop that all in the show notes for our listeners. And again, thank you so much for joining us today, Lana. This was an awesome conversation. And for our listeners, again, we'll make that call to action, like, subscribe, email us, DM us on Instagram, reach out. We want to hear what you thought, and we'd love your feedback. But otherwise, we will see you next week.
If this conversation resonated, like, comment, or subscribe, share, send us your questions. Nothing is off limits.
And wherever you are in your journey, know this: you deserve support that's real and human. Never forget to ask your questions, advocate louder, and remember, you're not crazy. Fertility is hard.
That's it for today's episode of Fertility Nurses Unfiltered. Thanks for spending your time with us today.
We'll see you next time.